As Nigeria targets 3.7 gigawatts of new solar capacity, questions remain about balancing affordability, industrial growth, and environmental protection. To unpack this, I'm joined by Jide Pratt, COO Iona, and Country Manager Trade Grid. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Shall I say good morning, Perpetua?
Good morning. Yeah. Okay, so Nigeria recorded about $245 million in renewable energy investments in 2025 as more Nigerians, businesses, and even the government, shift to solar power. But I'm asking, are you concerned, or what do you think is actually driving this move to solar power in Nigeria?
Thanks again, Perpetua. So, we all need to be very clear. The power condition, or shall I say situation in Nigeria, hasn't exactly gotten to its best. And this has happened for well over 10, and I always say this, UpNepa is a 50-year-old problem. So what it has happened is that over time, people have found ways to sidestep the grid problem. If you run a business and you can't depend on the grid, what you do then was that you'd find ways of getting a generator. We got that phrase, I better pass my neighbor, from that as well. And at that point in time, one of the things we found is that smaller generators became, and I'm going to use the word cumbersome, because you found so many generators in the same location, all wired, and that became a safety concern. Nigeria has excess sunlight, and I use the word excess because when you have when the sun shines for, let me say, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, what it means is that the alternative energy solutions become rife. Solar, wind, hydro. So let's go into solar now. As it is, there's the DARES initiative, and that's the Distributed Access for Renewable Energy Scale. They started with a 750 million funding. That funding is supposed to, on a second tranche, get to 1.1 billion. What that has done is that we found smaller ways of generating energy in pockets, for be it shops, SMEs, houses, and now we're getting to industrial scale. As this continues to happen, the question we begin to ask ourselves is that while the grid could be stranded by gas for now, as that is being worked on, the alternatives in terms of solar are growing, which is a good thing. We've also talked about the fact that I think we've now gotten to 300 megawatts in terms of generating capacity for solar. There's still much more that we need to get to. But as it is, I would say we're a step in the right direction. And as those costs begin to drop, then the scale will continue.
What costs are you talking about?
Now, I'm talking about the cost. When you look at things like solar panels, when you look at things like batteries, as technology improves, you also find that our cost in terms of economies of scale begins to get better. If you look at what is happening in places like Nasarawa, Nasarawa has always had excess lithium in terms of the raw material. But we now have more companies that are being able to produce locally, not yet enough, but at the same time, that balance of imports and local production, economies of scale, capital that is patient, begins to drive us towards larger production. And for me, safety concerns will be there, but we must mitigate against them. So I think that's a good way to start, in my opinion.
All right. Hold your thoughts. We'll take a break now. And when we'll come back, we'll continue with this conversation. Stay with us. Glad to know you're still with us, and we're still talking about solar power adoption in Nigeria. I have Jide Pratt right here with me. Thank you so much for staying with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so does it matter to you that the shift we're talking about is not necessarily expedited as a result of a conscious, transition to cleaner energy?
I would say no. So if you have a problem, you begin with the end in mind. What is the end in mind? We're energy poor. So it means that if that is the problem we're trying to solve, while quote and unquote, the transition might not be based on the fact that we're looking for cleaner energy. The point is that we're looking for energy. So begin to look at your comparative and competitive advantage. Again, we've spoken about Nigeria. You wake up, 8 o'clock, the sun is out. And that sun pretty much stays till about 6 p.m. So what it is that if we go the step of saying that we want to solve energy problems, then solar becomes not a nice to have, but a must have. The second thing, again, as technology continues to increase, we always used to use lead-acid batteries. Lead-acid batteries emit. So by effluxion, once they're in the house, then there's some environmental concern. If you look at technology again, we now have more lithium batteries.
But how many of those lithium batteries are getting into the homes?
Quite a lot. So what has happened, in fact, and Perpetua, the problem has always been the cost. They're more expensive. So what you find out is that the limiting factor wasn't the availability. It was the capital to buy it.
Absolutely.
But now you found a lot of companies are going into it where the models for paying are now stretched. So you find someone paying, there's a certain, what we do with some retail stations, they pay over 60 months. So what you find out is that...
That's 5 years.
Yes, that's 5 years. And the point is that the retail stations are manned based on they're going to sell petroleum products daily. That cost of moving from diesel alone to going to lithium batteries, quote and unquote, in terms of solar energy with panels, it saves them 50 to 60%. So they're doing that. The flexibility now is the fact that those inverters are installed. We install it on the forecourt, and they pay as you go for 60 months. So getting into homes, Perpetua, you find out that a lot of services are now offering flexible payment models.
And so for the homes where they already have these lead-acid batteries, what are we doing about it? Are they even aware?
They are aware, but you see, if I've bought a battery and I've bought it's an investment. If it's taking me 4 years and the end of life is at the 5th year, then with more awareness, you'll find out that people are now knowing and upgrading their inverters from lead-acid batteries to lithium batteries. However, this is what is critical to note. In terms of disposal, and I don't know if state agencies like LOMA or maybe the REA, there must be some education in terms of, you don't just toss a lead-acid battery, in the waste bin. There must be ways where they're collected and properly disposed so that they reduce whatever excess exposure is there. So, I mean, they're getting into homes. Flexible payments are now an option. So I think those are things that are helping us much better.
I like how that you touched on regulation, but we'll come to that later on. 300 megawatts, how significant is it?
I would say a dent. So let's...
I didn't get that.
A dent.
A dent.
Just a
tiny.
dent. Yes, it's just a tiny dent. So think about it this way. We say we're 200 million people. Mm-hmm. We say that the people that do not have access to power or reliable power is about 70 million. So if you look at it at 300 megawatts of electricity or power in a nation where we think that we should at least be on 20,000 gigawatts of electricity in terms of generation, transmission, and distribution, then you see that 300 is just a dent. But it's a step in the right direction. What do we need to do to open it up? And I think that the Rural Electrification Agency has done a stellar job. But while we tell them they've done a stellar job, the reward for good work and hard work is more work. So they still need to invest. As we've moved into the rural areas, the semi-urban areas, the urban areas, I think one thing that would basically scale this much better is you now find out we now have a reverse grid methodology, which we didn't have before. So if we decide that, look, what we can do here is 10 megawatts, but what we only need is 4 megawatts, then we can sell back 6 megawatts to the grid. Acts like this, policies like this begin to enhance that rapid development. I say it's a dent because when you look at it, 750, we've only spent about 250 in 2025. There's 500 million that hasn't been deployed. There's another 1.1 billion that's still coming. So it's opening up that sector and letting more people participate, local governments, state governments, and at the federal level, because that is the only way we're going to scale. It's a dent, work in progress, but so much more work to be done.
I recall over a year ago when the government was contemplating a ban on importation of solar panels. And what's your take on that? What megawatt do we need to get to before we can then start, contemplating or considering that?
In my opinion, and I said this the last time we talked about this, that when you begin to ban something when you don't have enough of it, it's like shooting yourself in the foot. So let's go back. We're just at 300 megawatts. We haven't scratched the surface. In my opinion, it's still just a chink or a dent. So what we need to do is jettison those conversations. In Nigeria today, I think we have 2 companies that actually produce solar panels here. And that production is not full production. So look at it that maybe it's a 60-40. So we haven't started backward integrating. We launched something in, I believe it was Nasarawa. Nasarawa has launched a lithium processing plant. So Perpetua, we must get to the stage where lithium from there comes out as panels somewhere in Nigeria. Once we get that and we're able to meet Nigeria's needs and start selling into West Africa, things like the African Continental Free Trade Agreement help us sell Pan-Africa. So I think discussions on banning are still way too early. We haven't gotten to where we want to be. If I wanted to add power utilization, then probably we was getting to, in fact, I don't even want to quote anything, but what I want to say is that those conversations are still too early. Get a few companies that are producing locally, encourage them to scale. Once they scale and we can begin to solve Nigeria's power problems, then we can begin to export. Maybe at that point in time, we now think of not banning, but increasing the taxes, increasing the duties for those who will be bringing in, but not banning outright.
All right, so where do you see Nigeria's power sector in the next, say, 5 to 10 years? I need you to talk about, the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, and the base case scenario. I'm asking this particular question because I just wanted to consider the national grid while you're talking about this. I want you to consider captive power, where we have industries generating power and all of those. So let's do that in about a minute.
So let's look at it this way. Today we have, in terms of installed capacity of electricity, we probably have about 10,000 megawatts.
So they say between 13,000 to 15,000.
That's what they say. So I'd go with about 10,000. So we can humor them and say between 10 and 13. That's installed. Now, what is transmitted is lower than that. So the worst case scenario is where we are now. Where we transmit is basically about 6,000.
It's not so that
what is distributed is about 4,000. So this is the worst case scenario. So what do we want to do in the next 24 months? We want to be able to get 10,000 in terms of distributed.
In like 10 seconds, we're out of time.
So in terms of generated, distributed, and transmitted, 10,000. By 5 years, we should be getting to somewhere around 20,000 across those three frontiers.
For that to happen, a lot of things have to move. We'll talk about that some other time, I promise. All right, thank you so much for staying with us today. It's been amazing having this particular conversation with Eniola and Jide. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Perpetua Fasami Peter. Join you the rest of the day. Bye for now.